This is a question I've gotten a few times lately. How do I automatically populate an Excel spreadsheet with diver data? Everyone has these spreadsheets and we see them a lot. They're little dashboards in Excel. Let me bring up my little example here. And I just have a little dashboard, patient revenue, inpatient versus outpatient, and a total actual versus budget. You can see that the actuals are blank. And if I click there, that's not a zero, it's a reference to information in a data tab. And right now my data table is just all filled with zeros. Normally that tab might even be hidden. But what we want is to be able to go into data, say refresh, connect to Diver, get a DiveLine login here, log in, and boom, my numbers are populated. So how do we accomplish this? Answer, as of 7.1, build an external data connection in Excel using the DI ODBC driver, a relatively new and very powerful option. So what are we going to have to do to get that set up? First, we're going to have to prepare an ODBC data source in Windows, get the driver installed and configured. Then we're going to have to choose the data that we want to extract. And depending on how we're setting things up, we might choose from a couple of different options. We can point the driver at a C-base or a C-plan, and then control what we get back from that data via a SQL query. Or if we're building something a little more centralized in application, it's nice to produce a Spectre dive that returns exactly the right data based on a select star query. That's basically the equivalent of setting up a view in the database to control exactly what the user is going to get. If we're pointing at measure factory data, we can do either thing. The measure factory will present us with access to any of the underlying views or scopes, or to the measures in the factory by name. Once we've got an ODBC data source and have some data, it's time to go into Excel. We'll go to the data connection wizard, we'll point at a DiveLine server, and we'll pick the thing we want to open. We might or might not then have to modify the SQL query in order to get the data we actually want to see. So let me just go back to back to Excel here. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at data sources. You'll see I actually have the 32-bit data source administrator up. If you have 64 and 32-bit on your machine, you need to choose the one that matches your version of Excel. Doesn't matter what the server does, it only matters about your version of Excel. When we go to add a new driver, one of the options will be the Dimensional Insight ODBC driver. We provide both 32 and 64-bit. We can choose that, and we'll be presented with a dialog to fill in. The usual data source name and description. We pointed a DiveLine server by server and port. Should be the same thing you would point ProDiver at. Username and password to log in. If you leave one or both of these blank, you'll be prompted. And a project and a file for the specific thing we want to open. Here's one I've actually filled in that points at the all measures C-plan in my hospital operations measure factory. So I pointed a DiveLine server and port. I store my username but leave the password blank, which is why it prompted me. And I point at measure factory hospital project and the all measures C-plan. Once we have the driver set up, we can go back into Excel. And I'm just going to create a new tab and start something from scratch. So I'm going to go to data and look at my data connection wizard. Choose ODBC. I'm going to point it at my measure factory. Prompted to log in. And you see I'm given access to a number of different tables. A whole bunch of tables that start with input underscore, and then this one at the top called data. All of the tables that begin with input underscore are the scopes in my measure factory. Every different scope that I've set up, pointing at a data source and doing some aliasing and defining some rules. All of that information will be available to you in the individual scope-based views. The one called data is the one that brings everything together and gives me access to all the measures by name as well. So if we click next, I'm going to just give this a name. We'll call it the Knowledge Factory Demo, Online Data Connection, and say Finish. And we're going to put it on the worksheet, and we're actually going to get back nothing on this. Let me just have me log in again. We get back nothing because when we access data, we're actually accessing a whole bunch of tables at once. On the individual tables, it would bring back everything. on data, we must specify a query that tells it how to summarize the data. And we can modify our query by going to the properties of the data connection, definition, and there's a space to enter a query. So we actually can reference all of the fields in the data. We can reference any measure by name by enclosing it within calc. And then we must, in order to tell it how to summarize, provide a group by. Sure, we'll proceed. And now we have admits by facility. And we can work with this data directly, or we can go to other tabs and reference this page. So that's getting data into Excel. Any questions?
We do have one question, Dan.
Sure.
One of the attendees wants to know, where do I get DI ODBC?
Oh, sure. The ODBC driver is installed on client machines. It actually already ships in 7.1 as part of the developer pack download from DI Download. Once you have it for information about installing and configuring, the DI ODBC overview will walk you through that. And if you want to know all the things that you can do with the SQL language, you can see the grammar supported at our regularly updated SQL syntax page.